Hey everyone, my name is Charles Pulliam-Moore. I'm a reporter with IO9, and I'm very excited to come to you today with a very special conversation, panel actually, discussing of all things Steven Universe. Steven Universe has come to an end, but the story isn't quite over. I'm here with a number of members from the Crewniverse to speak about the next upcoming art book that I'm super excited to show and share with everyone. But to get things kicked off, I would like everyone that's going to be a part of this panel to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Sugar. I'm the creator of the show.
Hey, I'm Kat Morris. I'm co-executive producer of Steven Universe.
Hi, I'm Alonso Ramirez Ramos. I'm also a co-executive producer on the show.
Hey, I'm Chris McDonnell. I'm the author and designer of the art book.
So this panel is basically going to be a rather freewheeling discussion of some of the more interesting tidbits that you can find inside of the book as you page through it. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of behind-the-scenes artwork, but also there are a lot of stories about what sort of was going on with the Crewniverse as they were coming into the final stretch with the last chunk of Steven Universe itself, Steven Universe the movie, and then obviously Steven Universe Future. So I really just kind of wanted to kick things off with a rather open-ended question for you, Rebecca, specifically, but then would love for everyone to follow up. The book really clues you into how organized Steven Universe always was from the very jump, no matter how twisty and turny it seems, but also the way that you and the crew were very flexible about the organization of your story. Talk to me about how the book really clues people into the way that the Crewniverse had this grand vision from the jump, but also was able to pivot as was necessary to put the story together.
Right. Well, one of the things I'm really excited about with the book coming out is that a lot of our charts and organizational documents we can finally share. And frankly, many of these existed when we made the first art book, but we couldn't include them because they were so full of spoilers. So what I'm excited about is that these are real process documents. So they're not the ultimate canon. You can see how things ended up shifting and pieces that we were going to elaborate on that turned into something else. And we've flagged a lot of these spots to kind of explain what we ended up discussing as a crew. There's also little pieces that we found other spots where this is one of the things I'm really excited about. A lot of these ideas, especially that we had very early on, some of them that didn't fit earlier in the series ended up finding a home in Future. Some of them found a home in the movie. So it's exciting to me to get to show all those pieces, all those cutting room floor pieces that ended up being scooped back up because we were so attached to them that we were able to find a home for them later. In one of the charts, for example, when we introduced the off colors, there were more off colors, and we ended up not being able to include that many characters in a scene. It was just a lot of characters to track. So there were characters named Flint and Chert who actually show up later in Future, but were originally going to be part of the off colors, little things like that, and little story elements that we had planned, just throughout these charts. I'm really excited about them because they were so loose, and it's funny to me when you talk about how organized it was, because it's really the flexibility that stands out to me, and how these were more documents about what we were excited about. When I look at them, what I see is our collective excitement and the things that I was getting really attached to at the time, and then the things that we all worked on. They sparked a lot of conversations, especially in writers' meetings.
Yeah, one thing that was really early that didn't get used in the original show was Perfect Steven. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, that's the biggest, I think, the biggest conversation, the biggest debate. There were these early sketches, I think they're from 2013, of Steven in this large pink form, which we ultimately used in Steven Universe Future. And while we were on season 1, we had this huge debate over these sketches and this concept, because I think I had called the file Perfect Steven, the idea of him sort of powering up into this perfect mode. And we had this very heated debate over what it would mean for Stephen to be perfect, that this couldn't be a perfect form of Stephen, that Stephen is perfect the way that he is, so that the whole thing doesn't really work. And the fact that it was such a heated debate made me realize that there was really something there to explore. And a lot of those ideas ended up becoming Change Your Mind and becoming the finale and becoming this idea that if you did separate out Stephen's power, if there was a more powerful version of Stephen, it wouldn't be a better version of Stephen. It would be this terrifying version of Stephen that he really needs to be all of himself in order to be the character that we know and love. So those concepts became Change Your Mind, but we ended up actually using the visual for it in future. And by then we had decided that this would be a manifestation of his toxic stress and of the pressure that he had been under to perform in these certain ways, which also had everything to do with the debates that we were having back in 2013 on season 1 over this one set of drawings, which we could finally share.
Alonso, you came to Steven Universe a little bit later. Talk to me about coming on to the show at a point in which like so much of the canon had already been not just like planned out and established, but like out there in the wild. What was it like to come into this hyper collaborative, flexible environment with so much that was already established?
Yeah, so I came in later in the game for the post-production part of the movie, and then Future was in pre-production during that time. And yeah, one of the first things I saw was those future charts that had the whole future plan laid out. And I was like, can I get that? Can I get a printout of that, please? Like, as a fan, I was like so excited to know what was coming next. But like, I was so happy to see that there was such a clear plan, such a clear strategy to follow. And as a working tool, it was just really helpful to see it all laid out. And since we worked on the episodes out of order, it was really good to always to go back to something that we could reference. But, you know, we have Rebecca's, it's all in her head, so we can just ask her.
Kat, last time that we spoke, you mentioned how being able to, mimic someone else's art style was like a badge of honor. And it's like, yeah, that's right, you don't know who drew that. Talk to me about, what elements of the evolution of like Steven Universe's style that you can really pick up on in the book in a way that wasn't necessarily the case from the original art book?
I'm not sure that it's too different in that regard. I think having all just the pre-final images in the book, you can see everybody's individual hand, because the way animation works is, you know, you have people here in Cartoon Network drawing things, but then we have to send it over Korea to redraw and animate. And so in that, the drawings still come through to a degree, but it gets flattened out a little because someone is tracing over it. So seeing that original piece of art, I think really gives you a clue into what people's individual hand is like. And in terms of what we were talking about last time, I was just really, really proud that Chris occasionally couldn't tell my drawings apart from Rebecca's, which I'm always trying to catch up.
Right. I think that, the hand, everyone's hands become very visible. The hands of the artists at the studios in South Korea too. I mean, you can really tell an episode from Sunmin versus an episode from RDK, and the different directors have sort of individual styles, and it's really interesting to see so many artistic opinions intersect in the final product when you finally see it, that it's the boards and it's the design and it's the drawings from our animation team all coming together to produce this final piece. And pulling the art book materials together, there's so much to try and solve in terms of who drew what. There were some designs for Future too that were modifications of designs that were modified earlier that we were just so deep into the show at that point that it was just touched by so many hands. And it's fascinating to try and pull those together and then attribute every aspect of it. Like, oh, I see this was a Danny Hines drawing, but the hair was modified by Becky.
There's a little bit of a game almost to try to figure out whose was whose.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a second sight that you guys had. And we all, like, after being on the show for a while and compiling everything, you kind of learn to see everyone's individual style.
Chris, talk to me about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, have we seen the charts on the screen yet so we could appreciate the design object of the charts themselves? Because if you take a look at this, I mean, even just as a designer, you can appreciate the layout of the information. It's got a little illuminated, iconic illustrations all peppered in with the flow of information over just a little peek of what's in the book. And I do like to note, I had this little gutter down the center there. That's my slight alteration from the original. That's for the folds of the book.
So, Chris, talk to everyone about like what your experience ingesting the show and the movie, and then the subsequent show was like as you were putting it all together. Because you're coming at this from a really unique vantage point. Oh,
I love it. It's great. It's a great project to work on. It's a gigantic research project, and it involves coming out to the studio when we do one of these books. This is our second book together. Spending about a week in person for myself, interviewing and gathering. And then I go back to my own, home studio and continue talking and discussing and gathering tons and tons more artwork and information from Rebecca and Kat and Alonso and everybody at the studio. And they put in an incredible amount of work. I mean, you were describing just laying stuff on you had physical boxes plus just drives and drives of material that you had to comb through. And these books, any of the books that I've done are only good because of the intense collaboration directly with the entire show team. And so that's why these books have been good, in my opinion, because the crew put in so much of their own efforts into making this book as good as it could be.
Yeah, as much as this is an art book, it's also filled with so many of the stories about everyone's experiences as they were working on the show. Not just experiences, but sort of like the kinds of things that they were going through emotionally that bled into the show. Rebecca, you in particular, really talk about how much of yourself is in the show. It's something that you've spoken about before, but obviously with the franchise coming to this, narrative apex point, you would imagine that there's so much there. Talk to me about one of the stories, at least, the story that immediately comes to mind that, you really felt was necessary to put into this book to let people know where you were at.
Right. Well, I think I've often talked about the pushback we received in terms of reviewing Sapphire and Pearl and Rose and the LGBTQIA content in the show. One thing that was nice being able to write about that in the book is that I could show actual images and say, here is something that I, was asked to change. Here's something that I drew the night that I was in one of these meetings. And to really talk about a lot of the times when I talk about what that was, I'm in this urgent mode trying to make sure that people will continue to do this work. But I think being able to actually talk about what I was drawing and what we were doing at the time, I got to reflect on it a little more personally in this book, just how these meetings were difficult for me. And also, especially in future, I was finally able to, over the course of the show, I really had to do a lot mentally to just stay afloat through a lot of what I was going through. And I learned a lot from doing that, that I was able to then work into Steven Universe Future, which I wanted to really discuss what I'd learned about mental health. And I think throughout the show, I had already been writing about that, but not from the perspective that I had gained over the course of working on the show proper. So to be able to talk about that too, and the insight that I got, speaking to various experts, speaking to Cartoon Network's bullying expert gave me a lot of insight into ways that I could be handling these characters that I hadn't thought of before. Because I think when I started the show, I was really operating based off of a lot of the media that I had loved, and I had wanted to see it do things that I'd never seen media do. But talking to a lot of these people and also learning a lot more about myself, by the end of the show, I was writing in a very different way. I was trying to build that foundation so I could really be confident in what I was saying. So it's exciting to get to talk about that whole arc for me personally. I mean, it was over 7 or 8 years working on this.
Yeah, the text on the book is really profound. We have this amazing artwork that is what hits you from looking at the book, but the text is the collective stories of everyone in the crew. And what's really interesting is we worked on the book through at home. You know, we were at home already, so a lot of these things happened remotely, and people just kind of completed these essays together. It was a really great, like, a group effort of the whole crew telling their stories and their experience.
We actually have a few more art slides like lined up, and I kind of just wanted to give everyone a chance to see them, and also for everyone to just like share their feelings about like, yeah, like we have like a large pink Steven here who caused like quite the stir when he finally made his appearance on the internet. And some of Steven Sugar's actually like gorgeous background art here.
Oh, that's Emily Wallace.
Oh, see, I was fooled. I'm sorry. And so actually I had another follow-up question about Steven Universe Future in specific. Rebecca, you had mentioned that so many things that ultimately ended up being pivoted from the core series into Future really sort of helped make the show. You mentioned a couple of characters, but like, what were some of the concepts potentially that you didn't necessarily have time to fit into Steven Universe proper, but then really prioritize putting into Future?
Right. Well, I think it's interesting. So when we were working on, you know, the show proper, but because of a lot of what we were trying to do, and because of the changing landscape of television in general, our future was so uncertain. And at a certain point, I was told, you know, this run is the last run. How many, you know, how much more would you need to actually finish the story? At which point I started campaigning for additional episodes and campaigning for the movie. So I got extra episodes that ended up becoming the Era 3 arc and Change Your Mind. I think that the big overarching concept that we weren't able to really fully explore was the toll that this was taking on Steven, and also Steven's own personal character flaw, which I think we all understood internally, that there was an aspect to his selflessness that was actually very destructive. And that was relating to some of his issues that he had with his own identity. And it was something that we talked about, but we weren't able to really dive into. And one of the challenges was that because we knew we had to age him up for the movie and that he would then be older in Future, we wanted to touch on some of these ideas, but now we were dealing with a very different Steven. We were dealing with an older Steven. But in a way, the medium kind of became the message, and the situation kind of dictated the story, because I think the terror of the pressure that we were under had really shaped us, or at least it was shaping me as a person. And then the way that he grew up under this pressure and under this stress, I mean, that was very much something that was, that we were sort of feeling. So to be able to jump into the future and to talk about a version of Steven that hadn't had the time or the space to unpack the severity of what he was going through at the time. I mean, every level of that was relevant, felt relevant to me. And so it ended up being, I think, a really interesting way to explore those ideas. And I think it worked out really well and became very honest in its execution. But in a lot of ways, the situation we were in created that story and shaped it in that way.
In terms of things we couldn't fit in, we also got Jasper's story, and the Gold Roses finally got released. Those are things that we had in Change Your Mind, but couldn't really expand on just because of time. And it kind of bloated out the story in a way that diluted the message we were trying to tell at the time.
Kat, like, I actually wanted to follow up with you on that. Like, from your perspective, what was sort of really important for you to bring to Steven's voice in Future to sort of really delineate that he'd become that, it was the future and he'd become a very different kind of person?
I mean, at his core, he's the same person. I think we're just seeing the effects of everything that had happened to him. I think there's sort of like in the original series, it's a little more idealistic. You know, you can be a hero and at the end, everybody is happy, including yourself. But I think there's a lot of self-sacrifice and pain and the changes that causes. And so Future is sort of like the real take on the fantasy in a way, though both are equally, you know, the same reality in terms of cartoon worlds. But I don't know, Rebecca, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I remember at the time being really interested in just the fact that if you go through a fight, even if you win, you still have gotten hurt. Like you could have taken physical damage. You could be dealing with emotional damage. I was thinking about the whole shonen genre and all the child heroes and how even if they win, there should be some chance to unpack the fact that you're a child that's being, put in deadly situations. I mean, that's realistically, that would be a very, very difficult thing to go through. I think in general, it would be nice if more stories could touch on, well, I don't know. I'm saying this for myself. I was excited to touch on just the ramifications of being in a fight, whether you win or you lose, and what you have to do to bounce back from that.
I think another thing that Stephen kind of has to deal with is the fact that he had to be an adult for so many of the adults in his life. It's not necessarily even just fighting against the diamonds, but just having to be so emotionally responsible to the point that it was harming him, I think is something that he needs to cope with now that he's older and he can see those adult figures for the people they really are.
Yeah, it seems like, it's interesting how everyone unpacks their problems at different times. And through the series, we saw everyone arc and everyone change. And it's really nice to see during Future the world at peace and the world change and everyone resolved, but Stephen still had so much to unpack, so much to unfold. And it was nice to see all the rest of the characters come and really to his aid and support him and be there for him.
Yeah. I'd like to give I wish he was here, but I'd also like to give a shout out to Zach Callison, who I discussed at length what we wanted to see Stephen as a character go through with Zach, and he inspired a lot of Future as well. But we're always very inspired by Zach. Stephen in the movie, Stephen's cool jacket was 100% based off all these cool jackets that Zach has that he would bring to the records. But he also really opened up to me about how, he was working in the industry from a very, very young age. And I related to that a lot too, as someone who came to Cartoon Network I wasn't a child, but I was 22 and there were a lot of things I didn't understand. And being put in a position where you suddenly have a lot of responsibility before you're necessarily ready for that. That was something that I was really interested in writing about. And I was really inspired by his insights about that too, just in terms of the acting world. So yeah, he's brilliant and he really contributed a lot.
Just to bring it back to the book really quickly before we close out, there is a little bit towards the end, there's a very particular bit of art that I think would be of particular note to a lot of fans, specifically about Morganite and her ruby and her pearl. And we sort of talked a little bit about how there was a grand vision for these characters that had to get scrapped in the end, unfortunately. Talk to us just a little bit about what that might have been.
Oh, sure.
It sounds so loaded, like they were controlling the entire arc and scrapped them.
Yeah, we had a Road Knight story, which I really liked. The idea was that Peridot had created a device that could let you know how many times you'd been rejuvenated. This is post-movie, so we've already established the rejuvenator. And so everyone in Little Homeschool, everyone in Little Homeworld is sort of getting checked out to see if they had these lives that they didn't remember. And most people didn't have any, and some people had one, and some people had two, and then they try it on Rhodonite, and she's been rejuvenated like 17 times, like a lot of times. And so everyone is very surprised because she's such a nervous gem. It's sort of unexpected that she would be someone who had been in so many situations where that would happen. And so what we did in the episode is we delved into her past and tried to have her reclaim all these memories. And then it became this, this, I guess, what would you call it? Like an anthology. Well, it's an anthology, but it's all about the same characters, this love story that just keeps happening and happening. The thought would be that every time that the Pearl and the Ruby that make up Rhodonite found each other and fell in love, that they were then rejuvenated so that they wouldn't remember, but every time they would keep finding each other again. So the issue with this story is that it was massive. I mean, it was like 17 episodes crammed into one episode, and it just could not fit and be as full and dramatic as we wanted it to be. But we wrote all these different stories of their.
Had a lot of titles, like a Rhodonite's Tale, I remember.
Right. Yes.
We really tried to make it work, but it was a lot of design that we just couldn't ask the crew to do based on the timeline. And Morganite, I think, created the palanquins, right? Was that
Yeah, Morganite's a designer, right? So we were going to have an artist gem. We were sort of designing a gem with design and architecture and everything in mind. These sort of paintbrush themed hairstyle, and she was small. I was interested in. I always like when gems are small, so that was fun. It was great. It was just so big. It was really a huge story.
You've given me the perfect segue to our closer. I really wanted to. Well, I'll just be honest. Like, we talked about how much of an influence the fandom really played in just the sustaining of Steven Universe over the years. Looking back on, what you all have built together, I don't know. Like, what are your feelings regarding, the people who have followed Steven from when he was just a little boy with the backpack to, this leader?
Right. I mean, I'm really grateful. During those stretches of time when we were doing really unprecedented things with the show that made the people that I was working with very, very nervous and very cagey about the future of the show. The enthusiasm of the fans and the fact that the fan base was so vocal and cared so much, there's no question that this allowed us to keep telling this story and to keep doing things in this world. So I'm just so grateful, so appreciative for all of the vocal, longtime Steven fans. I mean, this is really thanks to that energy, thanks to that care. So thank you. It's been the joy of my life to work on this show, and I'm just so grateful to have had so much time to do this and to have been able to continue even after Change Your Mind into the movie and into future.
Yeah. Anyone else have any parting words?
Yeah, thank you so much for watching. The crew worked so incredibly hard, so many nights and weekends, long hours, and reasonable deadlines, and it can be really exhausting. But knowing that people are watching and that they're picking up on what we're trying to say and loving it and taking it and doing their own things with it, like, I'm so grateful that everybody took the time.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm so proud to be a part of this and have had this experience and learn from these creators and artists that I admire so much. And I just want to send a big shout out to Lisa Sunic.
Yeah, Lisa.
Yeah, hey, Lisa.
Watching.
And to the whole Crewniverse. Thank you so much.
As for me, it's been an honor to help chronicle the history of the show, the behind the scenes, and just try to just even shed a little bit of light on just a part of all the artwork and all the effort that's gone into creating the series and the stories behind it.
Chris, thank you so much. You did a lot of work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
No, thank you.
It was such a task, and you did such an amazing job. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd also like to say thank you to, did I lose it?
You're still here.
I saw your
We can see you.
A screen popped in front of it. I'd also really like to say thank you, Charles. Your insight on the show and the articles that you've written about it, and your care, it's just been really wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the support. Thank you for moderating this panel. Thank you so much for really seeing what we were trying to do with these characters in this world. Thank
I
you.
think I speak for every single person who has watched and loved this show that when I say thank you so much for bringing this into the world, it is absolutely fantastic. The show, the book, all of it, truly, it's great. There is so much more that is in this book that everyone is going to want to see. Steven Universe End of an Era will be out very soon. I'm pulling up the exact date right now. October 13th is when it will be available in stores. Everyone should make haste and go check it out. Again, everyone, thank you so much for being a part of this panel. This was fantastic. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the future.